the first episode of Fresh Off the Press.
Yes.
How are we feeling? So we
Good.
picked a...
We got an interesting one today.
Yeah, we got a fun topic. We thought that this would be like the best one to start this podcast.
Yep.
Like perfect. It like fell into our hands.
Yep. Good old urethane. And the topic behind it is what just happened at Spring Hill.
So as you know, there's like a lot of talk about urethane, how it affects mostly the PBA tour. It doesn't really affect the women that much. We don't have a lot of women that go out there trying to like rip and grip it on a 45-foot pattern with urethane. So we don't see it as much. Actually, I would say on the women's tour, it kind of helps us sometimes when there are women that play with urethane. So I would say more on our tour, it doesn't really give anyone an advantage, but definitely see a lot on the men's tour, obviously.
You see it everywhere. You see it on every pattern. We're going to be bowling the Lucy this weekend, and I feel that urethane is going to be in play, and we're bowling on 42 feet. So any pattern is not safe from a urethane ball being thrown down the lane. I will say that.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about Spring Hill today.
For those of you who don't know, Spring Hill, check out the video.
Yep.
It's where Nate won. It's where Nate won his second title and his second PBA regional title. And yeah, I mean, we didn't know about all this until this last weekend. So like a whole 2 weeks from each other, we found out that there was some drama.
Yeah, and I'm not going to drop names or anything like that because this person doesn't need any more clout than he already has. But so let's just go back to the regional. Obviously, I won. Going into the cashers round of 16, round of 8, round of 4, title match, urethane was the play. And there was, in order to get to the step ladder or the top two, you had to figure out a way to use it. And
I want to talk about the word use. And when we're talking about this specific tournament, obviously, like, people just think urethane is urethane, and people are like, oh, one person is only good because they can throw urethane. But in this instance, like in this tournament, Nate had to use like 3 different releases for his urethane ball to even look good. So like during qualifying, there was like a point where he came back to me and he's like, what do you need to do? And I was like, look, you probably need to loft it and throw it slower. His ball, like, he was getting into the pocket, but it's just like wrap 10. Like, it didn't matter what he did, so he had to throw it slower. That was during the qualifying. Then he gets into the next day, and kind of same thing. He had to loft it, but throw it a little bit faster and keep it in front of him. And then towards the end of the blocks, he had to literally, like, jam it into the ground to get his ball to, like, hook early. So I want to say that the word use urethane is like used very lightly, because it's like, it wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to throw the urethane ball with my eyes closed. Like, he legit had to do like 3 different releases and speeds throughout the entire weekend to even get to where he was, because, like, he started in 18th place. It's not like he had the freaking urethane look of the century where he was, leading the tournament by 300 pins using urethane. Like, he literally had to like fight his way to get to where he was.
Right, and not only that, but you had to have several different options. Excuse me. You had to have several different options. So as the day went on Sunday, I hit pairs where they were tighter. I hit pairs where they hooked more. I hit pairs where it was the tightest pair I've ever seen. So I had 3 different options. I had a max flare urethane, which 3 3/8. I had a very weak urethane, which is about 4.5, but I've used it quite a bit. So like, it had some games on it. It was cleaner throughout the lane, sharper down lane. And then I had one, the same layout and everything, but it was a different year. So I think it was like a 22, but I barely used it. So it was pretty fresh, pretty strong, read the lane a lot sooner than my weaker one did, but still had like the same motion.
Which, like, pause, just that alone. For those of you who just think all urethanes are the same and like people are just like good at throwing urethane, even if you're good at throwing urethane, which there are guys on tour that will like straight up tell you they're not good at throwing urethane. So even throwing urethane, for the most part, is a skill, like, and knowing what each urethane ball does. So these guys, You know, I'll use Buttriff as an example. A lot of people say, oh my God, he can only throw urethane, but like he has different urethane balls. They might be the same ball, but they're all drilled differently, or he knows how many games he put on them. So he knows this one rolls different than this one. Like even when you're using urethane, it's like having an arsenal. Like you're just not taking in one urethane ball and scoring. Like, so that's a whole nother part to it that like people don't understand, is that like I don't use urethane a lot. I can now, I've learned to, but I have 2 urethane balls. I have the purple one, the pitch purple, and I have the black one, the pitch black. Like that's all I have. I don't have different layouts. Obviously as a woman, I don't need as much, but when Nate's throwing urethane, like I help him and I can be like, hey, you need this shape or that shape with his urethane, but I wouldn't know which one to go pick out of his bag for the urethane pieces to like help him get to that. I can just be like, hey, this is the shape you need. So that alone, that he's able to like, and other guys on tour know the difference, like the little differences between each urethane piece in their arsenal, like that's not easy.
No, it's definitely a skill set, one that you have to know, and then if you do know it, you're a pretty special player for sure. So let's dive into it, right? So we're bowling into the cashers round, and I finally figured something out, you know, getting it into the lane, slow rolling it, making it shape, doing the right thing.
Mind you, at this point, he's like +6.
I'm +6.
And the leader's like +200. Like,
Yeah.
so at this point, Nate's just trying to bowl to like get a higher cashing position for his entire tournament. Like, he wasn't even thinking like, oh, I can win it at this point. Like, he was literally just like, all right, I need to go in, shoot as high as possible to just get myself up for a Player of the Year race.
Right.
Like, that's all he was thinking.
Right. And, you know, we found a way. We went 145 over that block to jump all the way from 18th to 3rd. And we finally figured something out. An individual that I was bowling with at the time, that I didn't know until this past weekend, went up to the tournament director and wanted to protest myself and another player's bowling ball, just because his ball wasn't doing what my ball was doing. And I find that very comical, because I would never question Jesper Svensson or Jacob Buttriff if their balls were soft, because they've been doing it their whole career. You know, I don't think they're openly cheating.
Before this was even a topic, like those guys were winning titles. Like before it was even like, not that, and we'll dive into it, not that the topic is not something that needs to be spoken about, but these guys, like Bill O'Neill's a perfect example.
I would never question Bill.
Yeah, and he's a perfect example because he's a guy who did not like urethane. And then guess what? He learned to throw it and then won a title throwing urethane. But that wasn't like something he liked to do.
Right.
Like Prather would say when it has one of the best releases in the game, but he'll tell you like he does not like throwing urethane. It's not his #1 skill set. But then you see him throwing urethane against Kyle on the most recent PBA show because he was trying to play a little bit straighter than most of the guys. So it's like a skill set, but you would never be like, oh, these guys got to that point just because they were throwing urethane.
Right.
Like, it's not that simple.
I mean, I wouldn't really question anybody, you know, if they were trying to make their urethanes softer. But we'll get into that. But anyways, so they wanted to protest because they wanted to protest my ball and another player's bowling ball because his bowling ball wasn't doing what my ball was doing. I just find it comical because obviously today's game you have to know how to throw urethane. Now, obviously it's going to change next year. It's going to be a whole different animal. But you had to find a way to keep up with the urethane scoring pace. And I found a way. I was also using proper hook zones in order to get my ball started up in the right part of the lane in order for it to create the right shape through the pins. What's something that I don't stand for is the question of my integrity. And that's something that I will stand for to the day I die. I am not a cheater. I am not going to try to give myself a competitive advantage by destroying or manipulating my sponsors' equipment that they work so hard to make in order to try to give myself an advantage. There are some people out there that do it. That's fine. You know, I'm not going to tell you how to, you know, I'm not going to tell you how you represent a company. I'm not going to tell you, you know, to not do it. You know, it is your option to do it. But I found a way in order to make my ball shape properly in order to win the tournament. I'm not sitting here and saying that I made it shape like another ball, another urethane ball. I'm not comparing the two. I just did what it took to win. I just did what it took to advance to the further rounds.
And if we're going to talk about the facts, in those rounds, once we got past that first round, Nate was one of the only people throwing a pitch black.
Yeah.
So it's
it
not
got
like
to the round of 8.
Yeah.
It was myself, and I believe I was leading at the time, and another player, Pete Burgos. He was the only two. We were the only two Storm staffers left, and then obviously Pete didn't make it to the round 4, but he had a great weekend as well. But I just found a way to do it. I found a way to get there, to put myself in the position to win. I don't think that it is any part excusable or it should be allowed that a certain person can have, it's not even an opinion, it's an accusation at this point, for someone to be accused of doing something when they know who I am, they know the person that I am, they know how much I do for the sport, how much I, put the time in to this sport, to make an open accusation that I would try to cheat to get a competitive advantage just because he can't do what I do. He can't make his bowling ball do something that I could. If I was throwing a reactive ball, it wouldn't have been even a question at this point, because at that point it's all about, just like with urethane, you have to match up. With reactive, you had to match up. In Spring Hill, you could not throw reactive and average 250, 240, 230 to keep up with the top 4, the top 2 at that point. You had to have something special.
And the scores definitely got higher during that round because everyone was in the same part of the lane doing the same thing. So it wasn't like qualifying where you could get away with throwing reactive because there was people all over the place. When you get into those like casher rounds and stuff, like there's a reason why it's the cashers round is because it's most of the people that found a way to make their ball do the right thing. And when you get into those top 8, it's the same thing on the national tour or even on the women's tour. Like when you get into those other rounds, scores get higher and higher, not because the pattern got easier, not because even necessarily because the way it was laid down on the lane every time. It's because those players have now found a way to get the lanes to shape the correct way to get their balls through the pocket, the most efficient for every player. So now when you're all in that same part of the lane doing the same thing, now it's just about who can throw as many good shots for the rest of the day to get to that title match.
And not only that, you have to take notes on each pair that you're going to. You have to be paying attention to which end of the house hooks more, what's tighter. Again, I hit several pairs that were very tight, so I had to switch to a stronger urethane ball. In my title match against Carlos, that was the most hooking pair I've seen all day. And I was the deepest I had been almost the entire tournament with the urethane ball on the fresh.
Yeah.
So I had to make a quick instinct decision. What ball am I going to throw on this pair and what zone I'm going to be in? And obviously ball speed, loft or no loft, rev rate, different hand positions, you name it. So
even up until that last match, it was kind of like when they got onto that title pair, I was like, whoa, like this is a pair that through the top 8 and the round of 4, like Nate, I feel like had a little bit of advantage on Carlos. And then because of that lane and the way it had transitioned, like through the practices and stuff and just sitting there, because that particular pair had sat there through the round of 8 and the round of 4. So I honestly was a little worried going into the last match with Carlos that Nate was not going to have as good of ball reaction as Carlos did just because of, I feel like, how long it sat there.
Absolutely. If you were watching me in practice, if you would have told me I was going to shoot 260, I would have laughed in your face because I struck twice in the 5 minutes that we had. Yeah. And I threw 3 different urethane balls, maybe even 4. And I had nothing. But when the lights came on, I managed to find something in that split second and went, 9 spare, 8 in a row or 9 in a row, whatever it was, to close out the match. But
I think what it comes down to is it's like people, and it's not even in this situation. It's like I've seen it happen when someone wins on TV with urethane. I've seen, amateur events where people win with urethane and they're like, oh, that's all they can do and this and that. But or they make accusations of things. It's like in this situation, especially like this person, they're trying to bowl for a living. They're trying to do that as something that they're passionate about. But you're affecting people's livelihood, especially if you don't know for a fact that person did that. It's not like Nate's been going around saying oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that to have an advantage. Anyone who follows, especially this channel or anything on Nate's personal channels, like social media channels, knows that this man practices more than like anyone. And it goes back down to like when he was in college or even before. Like this man was in Kegel from 7 a.m. until literally like 9 p.m. like most days of the week. And then on the weekends, he was bowling. So like he didn't get to where he is because he was just,
looking for an advantage.
Yeah, looking for an advantage or like letting things fall into his lap. He's constantly been trying to like improve his game. So it's like these people are messing with people's livelihoods that make any accusations like this or be like, oh, this person is only successful because of this one thing, or like just saying that stuff. Like it didn't just like stay at the tournament. I think was the worst part is that it literally got back to Nate because this person posted on social media. They went to other people and then it had other people thinking. And that's the problem I had is it's not like it just stayed with the tournament director and at the tournament. There was actually things that were posted on social media and said to other people that this person literally had to go and apologize. So I think that that's what hurts is that it's not like in the bowling industry, it's like in cases like this, why can't you just go up and ask the person directly?
Or just have a conversation.
Yeah, have
just
a conversation.
Simple conversation and nothing would have escalated to where there's more bowling drama than there already is. So
yeah, which kind of comes back to like this whole problem with urethane and just why, I mean, I know Nate feels a little bit differently than I do, but just like watching it, obviously there is advantages and disadvantages to urethane, especially when it comes to the different bowling companies and the things that have been said and what needs to be done going forward. Is the problem is with urethane, it is a fact that they have done through testing that they can get soft over time. And that's the other problem is even with these new rules that the PBA is implementing, get these new balls that are at the 0.78, for urethane, is like some people could go out and soak their bowling balls. And then you don't know, who is not cheating and who isn't cheating. And I think that is the biggest problem is that it's like with urethane specifically, for those of you that don't know, it's like you can't really do this to reactive balls. So I think that this thing with urethane is always going to be a problem since there is ways to cheat. And there's no way to be like, just because Nate has better ball reaction than you just assume that he has a urethane that's soft or something. And that's what's hard is, for me personally, I think urethane has to be banned, not because I think it's ruining the game, but I think it's because there's so many unknowns with urethane. Like so many people I've heard say like, oh, I got a urethane ball because it hooks less than all my other balls. And the Pro Shop guy drilled it for me because I said my ball hooks too much in league. But they're not understanding like that there's so many other balls that hook less than what they're throwing or layouts. And they just throw a urethane ball because they see it go straight when they're not realizing now they're giving up pin carry. Like their average could go up or down just because they don't understand with urethane. And then on top of that, bowling other teams in league, I know it happened to us. People would purposely throw urethane against us, knowing it could potentially make the lanes harder
like that,
for people who are creating more angle on a house shot.
Correct. But I think that overall there just needs to be a little bit more education when it comes to why urethane is being thrown. It's not necessarily, and I hear it all the time, urethane is meant for dry lanes. Absolutely not. Especially if you're bowling on a house shot, because generally there's the majority of bowlers are, league bowlers or competitive bowlers, but their general knowledge in the pro shop is saying that urethane is meant for dry lanes. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be bowling league, and if it's a dry house, I'm not going to be throwing a urethane ball. There are some exceptions, whatever. Some bowling centers are wood, and they may not have the best oil machine. I get all that. I understand that there's some variables, but for the majority, when the lanes dry up, I'm not going to a urethane ball. I'll probably go to something in Storm's line, maybe like a Hustle or a High Road or a High Road Pearl, something that is designed for medium to lighter oil in transition. It just needs to be educated better. Maybe say, hey, urethane is meant for short or medium patterns to control, the pattern, the front to back motion, the back ends, to give you a more controllable look on the fresh or, when you're slightly moving in and you need to slow hook it. That's just what today's game is. But it's not meant just strictly for dry lanes. But the moral of the story is that I was accused, well, it was an accusation that I was acetoning my pitch blacks, and I would never do that. I would never do that to get a competitive advantage. I wouldn't do that. I know individuals that have. I'm not here going to call out names, but it's just unfortunate that our sport had to deal with that. And, I think that the PBA is taking very good precautions moving forward, hardening them up. It'll be more noticeable to see if there is any manipulation of urethane balls. But the moral of the story is, if you keep your head down, work hard, things are going to happen to you that, are going to be in your favor. And as the saying goes, you never hear anybody making noise about you if they're better than you. So if someone's making noise about you, they're either worse than you, they want to be like you, they envy you. I'm just going to leave that alone. I know my integrity. I know what I do. I know what I bring to the sport. I know the lives that I've changed. I know this sport has changed my life for the better. So I'm going to treat it as such. What's going to happen next year? We could talk next year about, the PBA and how we think it's going to affect it. And I think that a lot of, bigger balls are going to come into play, shorter pins. You have to be better with touch. So I see a lot of the players that have more touch, that can roll it or can trick it with their hand. I'm going to see them at the top of the leaderboard because they've already had to go through this era before urethane was, the end-all be-all, and you had to throw it on everything to keep up. So,
and let's just talk about the player of the year. The player of the year doesn't really throw urethane.
Well, yeah.
I mean, look, the tournament he had the worst tournament at was the tournament that everyone throws urethane at, and he literally was at the bottom of the leaderboard day one. And I know he came back.
He did, and he almost cashed.
He cashed, or almost cashed, or whatever. Yeah. But he doesn't throw urethane. And you don't want to know why? Because he's just good at tricking his hand. So it really, and that's kind of my thing with urethane and what I see the difference that I have an issue with compared to the women's tour. And I don't care what anyone thinks. I've spent hours watching the men's tour and I've spent hours watching the women's tour. And what makes the women special is we all have to perfect our craft to be good and bowl on patterns, which, by the way, our patterns are 10 times harder than the men.
100%.
Like if they put, obviously for the men, if we had like the same type of patterns, they would have to have more oil for the men, but the men would not like them because they wouldn't be a 240 strike fest every time.
Well, it's not only that. It's just like when patterns are usually flatter.
They're flatter. Like we bowled on a 1-to-1 at the US Open. Like
if you give the men flatter patterns, we are going this way and we are going that way. Well, and everything is going to be a mess.
You get like 75 million Facebook posts talking about crying about the pattern. And
there's not enough oil and all that good stuff.
You don't see the women do that because we honestly spend so much time perfecting our craft. And I'll say it, but I truly think that urethane for some players, and not just on tour, like amateur players, that it gives them, it's not an advantage, but they haven't had to learn to perfect their release and do different releases because urethane does kind of take a part of the lane away. And this is where the problem is. Some of these players can only bowl on certain things because they want to throw urethane on everything because urethane doesn't amplify their misses.
Well, I will agree with that statement.
Like if you have a higher rev rate.
Yeah, some people rely on urethane a lot more than they should.
But it's because they haven't perfected another thing in their craft.
They only score when it's in play.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. There are some people like that. I'm not saying there's professionals like that. There's just some people that I've had the experience crossing with or whatever. If urethane's not in play, they can just kiss it goodbye.
And that's the thing. Even in college, we've seen a lot of college, on the men's side, obviously specifically, where it doesn't matter didn't matter what pattern we were bowling on. We walk in and every single rack was a purple hammer, which is fine. It was a great ball for college, but it did not matter what we were bowling on. Every single coach had their players bowling on with a purple hammer.
Well, even if you even see it like at Junior Gold. I've seen plenty of the vlogs where all these kids are just throwing purple hammers or pitch blacks and they're throwing it to the gutter, and when it hits the pocket and it doesn't strike, they're like, what the heck is going on? Or they're just relying on it so much that that's all they know how to throw, and then when they need to get out of it, they have no clue.
Yeah, and that's the only problem I have with it is I do think that players are not advancing. Like, obviously the kids are getting better. Like, the technology, the resources they have at a younger age, these kids, like, physically are getting better, but they're not perfecting like these older guys that you have seen on tour, like EJ, Simo, you know, even the older guys like Chris Barnes, Tommy Jones, Bill O'Neill. Those
Sean
guys
Rash,
yeah, Sean Rash, you know, even like Kyle, who just won, like he had to change his game a little bit to be better on tour, where before urethane was a thing. You know, like before urethane was like everyone was throwing urethane on every pattern. These guys had to learn different tricks, like throwing it slower, lofting it, this and that. Not that you don't do that with urethane, but like you have to do that way more with reactive.
You definitely have to be more creative. Obviously we grew up in an era where urethane was meant in the very beginning 7 right. And if you got to 8, it was just like, it's not working, and then you had to trick it with reactive and stuff like that. I feel like that's where we're going back to. I still feel like it depends on the pattern, obviously. If patterns, you know, continue to have a little more shape and we get to throw it to that, I could still see urethane being a thing like that. It's obviously you're going to need this trick as our game still goes on. But I feel like it's going to slightly go back to that, but because covers are so much stronger, cores are bigger, stronger, more advanced, that we're still not going to go completely back to those days. But I remember if you were left to 7, it was time to get out of urethane.
Yeah. And I think it's a little bit more of like that instant gratification nowadays is like the way our game has going. Like, you know, we don't bowl back in the 90s where like shooting 200 was like helping you make a cut into a tournament. So I think it's a little bit about, especially these younger kids coming up, is they see these guys on tour striking and they're like, oh, I just want to strike every time. So when they're at a tournament, you know, if whatever that one thing they're really good at, let's say they are good at just throwing urethane, they're not going home to practice the stuff necessarily that they're not good at. And it's just like if they go to a tournament and they're like, oh, urethane's not it, they're just like okay with that because they know when they can get to a tournament that urethane is good, they're going to run it over. So they're okay with I won a tournament, I finished 30th. I won a tournament, I didn't make the cut. Like, I think that's what you see on the men's tour too, is like you see players that are really, really good with urethane, which is still, like I said, it is a skill set. It's not easy to do. Yeah. But when the urethane is not like the daddy for them, they're still cashing or something, but they're not in the top 5. They're not doing what Simo, EJ, and these guys are doing that consistently make their top 10 every week because they can literally trick their hand to do whatever they want to do with whatever ball. Like, I think if you just told everyone they could only throw one ball, you're going to see the same guys up there because it's not about just like the natural talent. It's that they have, whether it's they have to put in a less time period than us just because they do have that natural talent, they still spend the time that they have.
Their tools.
Like seeing what tools they can create.
Right, their toolbox is so vast and wide that as soon as they see a shape or they need to make a shape happen, that they know exactly what to do. And that's just what separates them from the rest of them, is that they know how to do that on command, be able to repeat it 85, 90% better than the rest of the field.
Yeah, which is exactly what people don't understand about two-handed, is like two-handed just created a different type of lane play because of the way your fingers, you know, your thumb exits the ball in a way, but like that is what makes two-handed so special, is that it cannot be created with your thumb in the ball. Yeah. You know, not that it can't be beaten, but that is what it's a power game. It's something that is different than what we grew up. Even me and Nate grew up being taught.
It takes a factor out of, you know, releasing, and you still use your thumb as a two-hander in a way.
Yeah.
And how you're able to, you know, get your fingers to do several different things. I'll tell you right now, two-handed bowling is hard.
Yeah, like, it's not easy.
I don't care what anybody says. It's like how you're able to create different rotations and tilts and stuff like that. I've tried it. I know it seems simple where you could just throw it anywhere on a house shot and strike, but two-handed bowling is very hard.
Yeah, it's definitely, and it's one of those things that hasn't been talked about a lot. Obviously, like Belmo is still, you know, he's not old, but he's getting older, and you know, who knows how much longer he will bowl. I mean, I feel like
I would love to see him bowl forever. I know I know I am a competitor against him, but just watching what he's done over the years literally changed the game of bowling is something to be, you know, admirable about. But
I think there's not enough being talked about, like what it's going to take for these younger two-handers and even the ones that are on tour right now to like be longevity. You know, we see Walter Ray bowling two-handed, but he didn't do it his whole life.
No.
You know, his body hasn't gone through the wear and tear of, you know, going two-handed. It's one of those where it's like, you can bowl one-handed, I feel like, and get away with not working out, not eating properly, this and that, because your spine is not taking as much force.
Yeah, you've definitely seen it with some players, but again, longevity-wise, they're probably not going to be, you know, bowling as long as Amuleto Monticello.
Yeah, you're not going to, and this is my opinion, like, you're not going to see people in their 55, 60s competing, you
at
know,
a high level.
At a high level.
Yeah.
Like Walter, he can do it, but he's not doing it for an entire block all the time. He's doing it here and there when he, you know, when he needs it. He's still very good at it, but I feel like if you're like, hey, Walter, go bowl the whole World Series, 85 games, two-handed.
I don't know if he could do it.
I think he'd get through it.
I don't know if anybody could do it.
No, I think he'd get through it, but we're talking at a high level. Like, he's physically and able to do it, but is he going to average 230 like we all know he can? Like, I just don't see that happening for 80 games. Like, what Tom Hess just did at the 50.
It was ridiculous.
I just don't
Even
see,
with one hand with a thumb in it.
Yeah, I just don't
ridiculous.
see
And he went and bowled the regional the next weekend.
Yeah, I don't see
2 days later.
a two-hander at his age being able to do that unless they're in, like, JJ shape.
Yep.
Like, JJ, we know, like, he's, like, the prime, I feel like, obviously, with Amuleto at that age where they're just, like, so in shape that, like, they could probably do it.
Yeah.
But how many, you know, let's be realistic, how many bowlers are training, like, a college athlete on a daily in their prime to be able to do that? And that's the other thing is, like, I don't think these college athletes sometimes realize that what you do now in your 20s sets you up for what your body's going to look like in your 30s and 40s. So
100%.
like, you can wait until you get to your 30s and 40s and start training, but your body's now catching up and trying to, you know, get back to where if you were doing it in your 20s, your body's like already priming. It's like you're priming your body to know what your body needs to do when it starts to break down.
Right. And it's so, the little things in college that I didn't appreciate, I definitely do appreciate now, like proper warm up, proper stretching, you know, proper working out, not lifting like 200, 300 pounds in the weight room when you're in your 20s, early 30s. You know, it's not helpful for your body. It only, like, you know, obviously it builds some kind of endurance, but I think you'll feel it a lot more later in life. But I still feel that, you know, just staying in shape, doing, you know, proper workouts, proper stretches, all of that is going to send you, you know, far, just like Amuleto, Ron Moore. That man, my God, he could bowl probably more games than any 20-year-old I've ever seen and still be able to repeat shots. I was able to, you know, bowl doubles with him, and at his age, for him to repeat like he does is incredible. So
yeah, I just think that it comes down to, like, understanding, you know, like we always told our college athletes, it's like, we're not bowlers, we're athletes.
Yep.
And, you know, I think that's where two-handed, it just needs to be talked more about the fact that it's not something that you're going to be able to just continue to do throughout your whole career at a high level without paying attention to, like, what you're doing now.
Right. You have to treat yourself as an athlete, you know, every single day. And if you're truly, you know, dedicated to the sport and you're able to give your life, you know, to the sport in your 20s, your 30s, you know, late 50s and such like that, it's a huge sacrifice. So you do have to treat your body very well in order to last that long.
When we look at all the greats in other sports,
LeBron James.
LeBron James, you know, like, he's taking care of his body. Yep. You know, like Tom Brady, taking care of his body. Yep. Tiger Woods, taking care of his body. Like,
for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, he's older now. Obviously, he's had issues because of other, like, incidents. But when it comes to his actual golf career, like, that's what we're talking about, like, the 1%. Mm-hmm. You know, obviously not everyone is going to be in that 1%, but, like, why not be in the 10, the 5%, you know, like, but those guys, you know, we use in it, like Serena and Venus Williams, like, they just retired. How old are they? Like, there was literally, like,
their 40s?
Yeah, they're in their 40s, and they were literally beating up on these 20-year-olds.
They're the top in the world.
Top in the world. They probably could still be playing right now and be top in the world, but they're probably, I mean, obviously you get tired from training at that level. Not that bowling needs to be training at that level, but I've always thought about it. It's like, what if what if everyone was training to be, you know, for those of you, I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix, like the quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, like obviously a lot of those guys train at that level in the NFL, but it's like obviously what Patrick is doing is just like at this other level. And if you watch it, you're like, it's that 1% mentality.
Right.
That we only have probably like a couple people in our entire industry that train at that level. And what do? They kick our ass.
Right. And I know, that
like,
at a certain point, financials is definitely like the number one question. Like, oh, well, you know, I don't have that much money to invest in a personal trainer or stuff like drinking water, cutting out soda, this, that, or whatever. We're not personal trainers. This isn't a, you know, podcast to like cut your diet or telling you what to do, anything like that. But we've just watched and seen the greatest at a certain level. And it's just, again, another sacrifice that you have to make in order to propel yourself to go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can't sit here and say that I'm like training at the 1% all the time. I mean, I definitely try to make better choices for myself to get myself to that. But I think what's hard, and this might sound like super dumb, but it's like, if you, even at this level, like I feel like we take it pretty seriously, but it's like if you knew everyone was training to be that 1%, like even us, we would probably train that much harder. Not that we don't
100%.
train hard, but if I knew that every other bowler on my tour or on, like I'm sure on your tour, was in the gym every single day, not even a personal trainer, like, or in the gym or like walking 3 miles a day, or like literally, if you knew your people like in the NFL or, you know, NBA, they have to physically go to practice every day to get better, or they're like training to understand the defense and the offenses or whatever. If you knew every single bowler professionally was doing that, like imagine where our industry would go.
Oh yeah.
Like,
I mean, you know, the best in the world are already the best in the world. I can only imagine, you know, how much harder it would be, both on men and women's sides. But yeah,
but it's just like, that's not what our industry is.
No,
and I think that kind of goes in.
You do have to find a lot of self-motivation, you know, it's because
you
also
don't
like the
have
bowling
that.
industry doesn't post a lot of personal things online or showing, you know, that they're going to the gym all the time. And, you know, the ones that do, quite frankly, I don't see consistency. Some of them I do.
Well, and even the ones, like, to be fair, like, if you're doing that, like I don't post when I go to the gym all the time because it's like I'm not a personal trainer. Like, I obviously want to motivate other people, but at the same time, like, in our industry, like, if someone is doing that, they don't have the time because they are trying to train to be that 1%.
Correct.
So it's, you know, and that, like I said, it comes down to the fact that, like, in other sports, people don't even have to know what they're doing. They know their competitors are doing it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like they know that if they're not the one training harder than the other people, there will be someone training harder than them.
Yeah.
And I just, that, you know, kind of goes into the topic of like why our industry is not where it should be, you know, marketability and all this stuff, because not everyone has that same mentality like other, you know, sports do. Like when you get into college athletics, for the most part, for these, you know, higher D1 sports, like it's hard. Yeah. Like you got to be in the gym every single day, busting your ass to make those teams. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, I've seen college bowling. It's not like that. And we have more people competing.
Definitely, some teams do have that culture.
Yeah,
I'm not taking that away from them.
Sure.
You know, I came from Weber International, and we had that culture. You know, maybe not so much in the weight room all the time, but we definitely had a staff that cared about us when I was there. That cared about us and
made
sure it was a priority.
Results, like why they're
sure, absolutely.
That's why we have certain schools that just dominate.
Absolutely. You know, the Weber Internationals, the McKendrees of our time, you know, the Robert Morris of our time, Wichita, you know, those programs, we were always top 4 in the country because that's what we, you know, were striving for, was the national championship. Both national championships, and
it's like, just imagine if all the schools trained at that level.
It would be very hard.
It'd be crazy.
And you know, it's unfortunate to see, you know, sometimes when the kids are making a decision where they want to go to college, they're just either going with their friends or they're going, you know, somewhere that they're all going to go travel and bowl together and not really take anything serious, which is fine.
Or they're all
That's
already
totally fine.
Well, I think it comes down to, like, they're at a higher level now when they're getting into that, and I'm not putting words in anyone's mouth, but it's like they feel like, I don't need the coaches because I'm already good.
I have
and
seen
I can
that.
go to and we can
And
go to
we're
college.
talking from a coach's perspective.
Yeah, like we've seen it like in live. It's like, oh, I can already average 220 on a house shot. I don't need to be better. And it's like college is where you get better.
Correct.
You know, you can average 220, you know, whatever, but it's like, what else can I do? Like,
Right.
what are your goals? And I think that is the problem, is that like it starts at the high school level, like
Yep.
treating it like a sport.
Yep.
So that way, when you get into college, you already know, you're already trained. You don't have to ask your coach why you're running a mile. You don't have to ask your coach why we're running stairs sometimes. You don't have to ask your coach why you only can drink water when
Yeah.
you're competing. That is the separation between our sport and why we are not where these other sports. I do not think it has anything to do with the fact that our sport is not marketable, because I think our sport is marketable.
Yep.
I mean,
both men and women, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
And this isn't saying like our sport is bad, or you know, we're not doing, you know, the right things. We're not here to call anybody out. That's not what we're doing here. We're just, you know, providing personal experiences and stuff like that. But, you know, going back to the whole college thing, you know, just wanting to go with friends somewhere and, you know, just have a good time, which is fine. That's not a problem. It just comes down at the end of the day, what do you want to get out of the sport? Where do you want to end up? You know, do you want to go down the career path of what you're learning in school, or do you want to take it serious and actually be a professional bowler or an elite bowler at that level?
Or do you just want to win a national championship and you don't really
Right.
give a crap about your schooling, and you're just, you know, trying to get a normal job when you get out of
Right.
college?
I've had those conversations at the end of the day, and if they say, oh, you know, I went to college, you know, to learn and be a professional bowler, but their actions aren't representing that idea. So
Yeah.
what are you going to do? Are you going to stay in that lane, or are you going to change and be better so that you can compete with these guys? Because
Yeah.
I've had plenty of conversations with kids, and they're just like, yeah, I'm going to go on tour. I'm like, the way you're going, you're going to have a rude awakening.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because you're not doing the things that are going to prepare you when you get out there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying you're going to have instant success if you do all the right things
Yeah.
and, you know, learn that way. But the learning curve is going to be a lot longer if
Yeah.
you continue to just, you know, go to college, party, not care, not go to practice, not wake up early, not do all those little things to put yourself in good habits to when, you know, you're getting ready for your weekend sweeper, you're getting ready for a PBA regional or the national
Yeah.
tour. You're not going to know how to handle it.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing too, is like when you see, you know, once you do get into college, and then, you know, in college now they can bowl outside tournaments, they can bowl the PBA events. You know, it's like, are you preparing for those events like you would, like if, like, I'm not saying all the college students are or are not, like if it was their own money, they had rent to pay, they had that stuff, like,
and I know some kids, they bowl on their own money, and
Yeah.
I'm not taking anything away from that.
But it's like, are
for
they
the people
taking
that
care
aren't,
of? Yeah.
for the people that aren't, you know, me and you have definitely experienced this. I've had
Yeah.
a bowl on my last dollar.
Yeah.
You know, and I was good,
Yeah.
better, you know, and then as I started to, you know, to get older and be wiser and get better, like I didn't have to worry as much about financials, but I bowled on my last $200, $300 before, and I'm like, well, this
Yeah.
is it, or, you know, I'm going to have to go back home, work for 2 weeks, and not be able to bowl for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, not a lot of kids like really experience that, and when you do, it's like that's that life-changing moment of like, okay, I need to do something better. I need to be better
Yeah.
in this, and this department.
Yeah, it's
So,
like, am I going to take it more seriously to get myself to that level, or am I just going to keep going in the same cycle and, you know, or have to quit, you know? And
Right,
I think
yeah.
it comes down to, obviously, our sport does not pay the same as other sports across the board. But again, that comes down to like where we need to go as a sport with marketing and like changing to try to get better as a whole community, you know, and that's kind of the point of all this. It starts with like when you first start bowling, like,
Yeah.
and, you know, getting to those next levels and having the coaching and the people that really care about the sport as a whole, as an industry. Like where do we see this sport in the next 10 years?
Yeah.
You know, we have to be preparing ourselves for that, you know, like that's the biggest problem in our industry and going forward, which kind of wraps into like everything we're trying to change
Yeah.
with the urethane balls is like, you know, a lot of people are upset that they keep changing the rules, but it's like there's a bunch of sports, you know, the NFL changes the rules every year to protect players or to do something. Like you have to do stuff with ever changing of the nature of being an athlete and at a professional level.
Absolutely.
You're not growing without there being problems, to be honest.
Absolutely.
You know?
That's going to wrap up the first episode of Fresh Off the Press. If you guys liked what you saw, please drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we have a bunch of new things coming to the channel. If you haven't seen already, we're
Make
opening
sure you
up.
check out our memberships.
Absolutely. We have a membership. Open up $25 per month. It gets you the basic package of getting exclusive videos, entered in giveaways, all that good stuff. If you upgrade to the more expensive package, you'll have double the offer. You'll get 2 entries into the special giveaways. You'll have one-on-one time with me and Elise, and you'll have all those exclusive content that the regular members have.
Thank you guys again.
Absolutely. And we will see you guys on the next Fresh Off the Press.